What if the calmest person you know is precisely the one who feels the least thing inside? Not the one that explodes, not the one who screams, but the one that never shakes. There is a type of person who goes through tragedies, conflicts, humiliations, and losses with the same neutral face, the same steady tone of voice, the same stare. While everyone feels, she observes. While everyone suffers, she calculates. And the most disturbing? She can be by your side now. Psychopathy is not synonymous with explicit violence. It doesn't start with blood. Starts with absence, lack of empathy, absence of guilt, lack of genuine emotional reaction. It is an internal silence where there should be something human. Some psychopaths are not in prison. They're in the office, in politics, in leadership. No loving relationship. They are functional, smart, charming, and completely cold inside. They don't get out of control. They don't panic. They don't show repentance. Because for that, it would be necessary to feel. If you've ever felt like someone seemed too normal, maybe this video will help you understand why. Why? There is a brutal difference between emotional balance and emotional coldness. Balance feels, but it regulates. Coldness just doesn't feel. And that difference changes everything. Imagine someone who can lie looking into your eyes without heart problems. Someone who witnesses suffering and does not experience any internal echo, none nuisance, no moral tension. Science has already identified brain patterns associated with this profile. Areas linked to empathy and fear have reduced functioning. But the most disturbing thing is not the brain. It's coexistence. Because they learn to imitate emotions. They learn the social script. They learn when smiling, when hugging, when pretending to be indignant. But behind the mask, there is only calculation. And perhaps the real danger of modern psychopathy lies not in its aggressiveness, but in its stability. Eles parecem seguros, reliable, strong. Enquanto todos os outros se abalam, eles permanecem intactos. And this is exactly what makes them difficult to identify. But there is a pattern, little invisible signs that, when connected, reveal something deeply wrong. How to recognize someone who never shakes. Is coldness always psychopathy? Or are we living with something even more complex than we imagine? The biggest mistake when imagining a psychopath is thinking of someone out of control. Most are not. They don't attract attention for their chaos. They attract attention due to their excessive stability, are too centered, too calm, too rational. And this is exactly the composition which builds the so-called social mask. The social mask is a set of learned behaviors, not emotions, genuine. These are copied answers, observed throughout life, rehearsed, adjusted, perfected. Desde cedo, muitos indivíduos com traços psicopáticos percebem que não sentem como os others. They don't understand other people's discomfort. They don't understand why someone cries for guilt. So they do what they do best. They analyze, they study, reproduce. If in a certain situation everyone is sad, they learn to look down. If someone reports pain, they learn to say, "I'm sorry." Non perché sentem, but why they understood that this is the socially expected response. It's theater, but a highly functional theater. Studies in neuroscience indicate that regions such as the amygdala and prefrontal cortex ventromedial, associated with empathy and the fear response, show reduced activity in individuals with high psychopathic traits. This means that the suffering of others does not trigger the same internal alarm. While the average person feels tension, discomfort, and even automatic guilt when harms someone, the psychopath can remain physiologically stable. Heartbeat-controlled heart rate, regular breathing, absence of moral anxiety. This stability creates a powerful social advantage. In negotiations, they do not tremble. In conflicts, they do not hesitate. In difficult decisions, no carregam peso emotional. They are seen as strong leaders, cold strategists, mature. But there's a difference between emotional maturity and emotional absence. Maturity recognizes the feeling and decides to act with balance. The absence, it simply ignores it because there is nothing there. And this is where the discomfort begins. Because in everyday life, this mask is almost perfect. They can be charismatic, funny, articulated, They know how to tell stories. They know how to observe their vulnerabilities. They know exactly how to position themselves to gain trust. And when they realize that you trust them, they begin to test limits. Little lies, small manipulations, small distortions of reality. If confronted, they do not panic. They do not show guilt. Just adjust the narrative. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe he didn't even do it. I'm bad. This is the efficiency of the mask. They rarely reveal outright aggression at first. Control is subtle. Wear is gradual. The coldness is constant. And there is something even more disturbing. They quickly learn which emotions work better in each environment. At work, they can appear highly professional and disciplined. In relationships, intense and dedicated at the beginning. In the family, helpful and present when there is an audience. But look at the details. The absence of real guilt. The inability to take genuine responsibility. The ease of discarding people when they are no longer useful. The mask doesn't fall off at once. She slips. And when it slips, it reveals something empty. The question is not whether they show emotion. The question is there emotion behind the demonstration? How to differentiate someone emotionally strong from someone emotionally disconnected? Why do some people seem to walk through the chaos without any inner cracks? And what happens when that coldness stops being just stability and turns into total absence of guilt? Existe algo profundamente perturbador em alguém que nunca demonstra culpa. Não estamos falando de alguém que erra e se defende. This is human. We are talking about someone who harms, manipulates, lies, and sleeps peacefully afterwards. Guilt is a regulatory mechanism. It creates internal discomfort when we violate a value morals. It is a psychological pain that prevents us from repeating harmful behaviors. Without guilt, there is no emotional break. Individuals with psychopathic traits show a significant reduction in response emotional condition linked to guilt and remorse. Research shows that when looking at images of suffering, many of them show minimal physiological activity. The body does not react. Nervous system does not go into alert. It's as if someone else's pain were just information, not an experience. Shared. While an ordinary person feels chest tightness when hurting someone, a psychopath can just evaluate the practical consequences. He doesn't think that was wrong. He thinks, this cannot harm me. This difference is subtle, but devastating, because the absence of guilt allows for repetition, allows climbing, allows continuous coldness. Have you ever met someone who always had a perfect justification, who never admitted real error, that turned any confrontation into a reversal of responsibility? This pattern is not explosive. He is silent. When confronted, the psychopath does not despair. He rearranges the narrative. You can even apologize. But look at the content. There is no emotional weight. There is no real vulnerability. Just strategy. I'm sorry if you felt that way. Do you notice the difference? It's not about what he did. It's about how you reacted. This constant inversion generates profound psychological distress in the people around it. The victim, you begin to question your own perception. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe I am too sensitive. But there is another aspect that is even more disturbing. Emotional coldness does not mean a total absence of emotion. It means absence of certain emotions. Psychopaths can feel pleasure. They may feel excitement. They may feel angry. What is missing is deep empathy and moral guilt. They understand rules, but they do not internalize values. This is why they can maintain their composure in situations where others would crumble. In an unfair dismissal, they remain impassive. In a painful ending, no show mourning. In a family crisis, they assume a technical stance. Some are admired for this. He is strong. She's cold but efficient. Don't let yourself be shaken. But true stability involves emotional processing. It involves feeling and integrating. Psychopathic coldness is different. It is a structural absence of deep emotional connection. And here an uncomfortable question arises. If someone never shows genuine repentance, what stops that person from overcome increasingly greater limits? If there is no internal pain when causing pain, what defines the limit? If something here starts to make sense to you, stick with it until the end. What's next? It can change the way you observe people. Because the absence of guilt is only part of the pattern, there is also the search for control. There is also the need to emotionally dominate environments and people. And when coldness combines with social skill, something even more complex emerges: the invisible social predator. How does someone learn to use this emotional absence to their advantage? Why do some people seem to gain power precisely because they don't feel what others feel? And how far is someone without guilt capable of going when no one realizes what is really happening? Behind the mask? The absence of guilt creates freedom, but it is the ability to manipulate that creates power. The everyday psychopath rarely imposes control by force. He prefers something more sophisticated: invisible influence. He observes emotional patterns, identifies insecurities, map needs, and then he begins to act with surgical precision. Manipulation does not start with aggression. It starts with connection. At first, he seems too attentive, too interested, asks deep questions, demonstrates unusual understanding. Do you feel like you've finally found someone who really understands you? But it's not connection. It's data collection. Each vulnerability shared becomes a future tool. Every fear revealed becomes a point of pressure. Each exposed desire becomes leverage. And all of this happens subtly. A comment here, slight distortion there, a criticism disguised as concern. I only want the best for you. You know I'm the only one who tells you the truth. Without me, you would be lost. These phrases sound like care, but they build dependence. The social predator doesn't destroy your self-esteem all at once. It wears out. Question small certainties, reinterpret facts, rewrite stories, and he does it calmly impressive. When you try to confront him, he remains stable. There is no explosion. There is no lack of control. There is rationalization. It uses logic to invalidate emotion, use arguments to minimize pain, use silence to punish. Silence, in fact, is a powerful tool. Psychopaths understand that the absence of response generates anxiety in the other. Ignoring, delaying, temporarily withdrawing affection. Everything this creates emotional insecurity. And insecurity breeds control. In psychology, this pattern is similar to behaviors associated with personality disorder, antisocial personality with narcissistic traits. The combination is functional, absence of empathy added to the need for dominance. But there is a crucial detail. They don't manipulate everyone. Escalim alvos. They prefer empathetic, sensitive, responsible people. People who feel guilty about ease. People trying to repair relationships. Because they know that these individuals will insist, understand, justify. It's an asymmetrical game. While one feels, the other calculates. While one suffers, the other observes the effect. And the more you realize that you can influence your emotions, the more you reinforce the behavior. Control becomes psychological reward. You begin to change behaviors to avoid conflict. Start measuring words. You begin to doubt your perceptions. And ironically, he remains calm. You are exaggerating. That never happened. You are very emotional. This constant invalidation generates something called gaslighting, a systematic distortion of reality that makes the victim question their own memory and judgment. But here's the most disturbing point. To manipulate with this efficiency, you need to not feel guilty when causing emotional harm. It is preciso manter frieza en cuanto o outro desmorona. And this brings us to an even more disturbing scenario. Where do these people thrive? In what environments does this combination of coolness, control, and lack of guilt not only survives, but is she rewarded? Why do some cold individuals rise quickly in power structures? Why do certain leaders seem immune to emotional pressure? And does society, without realizing it, favor exactly those who feel the least? The social predator rarely lives in isolation. He lives integrated. It works. Date, attends meetings, participate in family events, greet neighbors, smile in photos, and it is often admired. Subclinical psychopathy, psychopathic traits that do not reach the criminal extreme, can manifest itself in a functional way. These people do not necessarily commit crimes violent, but they use emotional coldness, manipulation, and lack of guilt to advance. In the workplace, this can look like efficiency. While colleagues hesitate to fire someone, he executes. While others feel the weight of making unpopular decisions, he acts without internal conflict. The absence of moral anxiety can be confused with firm leadership. In positions of power, this coolness becomes a competitive advantage. Research indicates that traits such as superficial charm, high self-confidence, and fearlessness in the face of risk are often rewarded in corporate environments. Oh, the problem is not courage. It's the absence of empathy combined with ambition. Because decisions fail to consider profound human impact. And when someone is discarded, there is no real remorse. There is only substitution. In the family, the pattern is more subtle. It may be the member who never takes responsibility, but always finds justifications. What causes conflicts and then acts as if nothing had happened? What uses strategic silence to punish? What keeps everyone emotionally tense without elevating the tone of voice? There are no constant explosions. There is constant control. In romantic relationships, the cycle is usually predictable. At first, intensity, et in sum extrema, fast connection. You feel like you found someone different, strong, safe, mysterious. But gradually, small ruptures appear. Unfulfilled promises. Lies discreet. Lack of empathy in vulnerable moments. When you suffer, he analyzes. When you cry, he rationalizes. When you ask dialogue, he distances himself. And he always returns when he realizes he is losing control. The emotional back and forth creates dependence, creates expectation. It creates hope that initial version, charismatic and present, returns definitively. But that version was strategy. Subclinical psychopaths do not need to destroy publicly. They maintain social image intact. Friends may describe them as calm, even admirable people. And this discrepancy between public image and private experience generates isolation in the victim. Maybe only with me he's like that. Nobody notices anymore. I must be misinterpreting. This doubt prolongs the cycle, because the greatest weapon of everyday psychopathy is not aggression. It's the inconsistency emotional accompanied by apparent stability. As you try to understand feelings, it measures results. While you seek reconciliation, he calculates advantage. And here is the most uncomfortable question. We live in a society that values performance over sensitivity. What associates firmness to coldness? Who confuses lack of emotion with strength? Could it be that, without realizing it, we are rewarding traits that should alert us? Are we promoting people who don't get upset precisely because they don't feel the weight of your own decisions? If someone never shows guilt, never shows vulnerability, and never seems affected by nothing, is this maturity, or is it structural emotional disconnection? What if the true risk lies not in the visible extremes, but in individuals who are perfectly functional people who learn to use coldness as a tool for ascension? Then the inevitable question arises. If these traits are widespread in everyday life, how can we protect ourselves without falling prey to paranoia? Is there a way to identify healthy boundaries between emotional balance and lack of empathy? And, in the end, what does this reveal about human nature itself? Perhaps the most disturbing thing is not the existence of psychopathy, but her normality. We're not just talking about murderers or extreme criminals. We are talking about people who circulate among us, who work, who lead, who love in their own way limited, that never shake. The question that remains is not, do they exist? The question is, how many? The human mind is built on connection. We feel to regulate behavior. We feel to create a bond. We feel to limit impulses. When a part of the system fails, especially empathy and guilt, something fundamental changes. But not all coldness is psychopathy. Not all stability is emotional absence. The danger lies in the persistent combination of three factors: lack of genuine remorse, manipulation strategy, and inability to form a deep emotional connection. Emotional balance feels and processes. Psychopathy observes and calculates. And perhaps the greatest discomfort is recognizing that these traits are not confined to one isolated group. They can exist to varying degrees. They may be diluted. They can be subtle. This does not mean living with constant distrust. It means developing awareness, noticing repetitive patterns, noticing emotional inconsistencies. Realize when words don't carry real weight. True emotional maturity involves empathy and limits. It involves firmness without dehumanization. It involves strength without silent cruelty. When someone never shows vulnerability, they never take real responsibility, and it never seems affected by the impact it makes. That deserves attention. Because feeling is part of our human architecture, and those who don't feel the same way can see the world as a board. While you are experimenting with relationships, he may be analyzing positions. If this content made you think differently about the human mind, sign up. Here we explore what almost no one wants to see. But before closing, there is something even more important. Reflect on the people around you, not with paranoia, but with conscience. Who demonstrate consistent empathy? Who assumes errors without reversals? Who remains human even under pressure? And even deeper, do you recognize traces of excessive coldness in yourself? We all have shadows. The difference is in how we deal with them. Perhaps the scariest thing is not that there are people who never shake. Perhaps the scariest thing is realizing that we live with them every day, and many we sometimes call them strong. And then there is the final question. We are really valuing emotional balance, or are we admiring his absence? But there is something even more disturbing than cold, calculating psychopathy. There is a profile that doesn't seem far away. It doesn't feel empty, doesn't look like a strategist. On the contrary, he seems sensitive, intense, passionate, deeply human. Cry. D shows emotion. Talk about pain, about trauma, about injustices. And yet, it causes silent destruction. Not all predators use coolness. Some use vulnerability as a weapon. Some use neediness as control. Some don't feel strong, they feel broken. And perhaps the next level of danger is not in those who never shake, but in those who seem to be too shaken. There is a form of manipulation that is not born from the absence of emotion, but from her theatrical excess. And it can be even more difficult to identify. Have you ever met someone who seemed too fragile, but left a trail of chaos behind them? Where was it? Someone who was always the victim. But strangely, everyone around them ended up emotionally exhausted. Comment just one word. Empty, if you believe that danger lives in coldness. Or comment, mask, if you suspect that danger may be hidden behind something that looks like emotion too much. On the next dive, we will cross an even more uncomfortable layer of human mind, and you may never see sensitivity in the same way again.